Welcome, dear listeners, to a place where betrayal is exposed, secrets unravel, and revenge always finds its moment. If you enjoy powerful, emotionally charged stories with unforgettable twists, please subscribe, like this video, and share it with others who love captivating storytelling. And before we begin, I'd truly love to know, where are you listening from today? Let me know in the comments section. The first thing I noticed was the for sale sign hammered into my mother's front yard. I was still holding the yellow flowers I had bought on the drive over, the same kind I placed on her kitchen table every Sunday when Mama was alive. I stood on the sidewalk with cold hands, staring at that red and white sign like it might disappear if I blinked hard enough. It did not disappear. It had a phone number, a broker's logo, and a sticker across the bottom corner that read, "Price reduced. Price reduced." My mother had been dead for 11 weeks. I walked closer and read the listing box attached to the post. 4 bedrooms, original hardwood floors, corner lot, price to move quickly. Those words unlocked something cold inside my chest. Because that house was not my sister Cora's to price. It was not hers to list or reduce or move at any speed. And I knew, with the kind of knowing that settles in your bones before your brain catches up, that she had done all of this without telling me a single word. My name is Nadia Owens. I am 36 years old, and what happened next changed everything. My mother's name was Vivian Owens, and she spent 41 years in that house on Callaway Street in Columbus, Ohio. She raised 2 daughters inside those walls. She buried a husband from that front porch. She grew tomatoes in the side yard, fixed the porch steps herself 3 separate times, and always said the house was the one thing nobody could talk her out of or take away from her. Mama was 72 when the cancer came back the second time. She lasted 8 more months. I drove from my apartment across town every weekend. I managed her medication schedule, argued with insurance companies, slept in the guest room more nights than I can count, and held her hand during the final 3 days when she could no longer hold it back. Cora showed up for holidays and the last week. I say that not with bitterness, but because it matters to what came next. When Mama died in October, Cora cried the loudest at the funeral. She stood at the front of the church in a black dress that was a little too formal, a little too fitted, and received condolences like she was the only one grieving. I stood beside her and said nothing. I was already learning to stay quiet around Cora. Cora is 3 years older than me, and her whole life she has operated on one belief. Being firstborn means being most deserving. She is 40, works in marketing for a mid-sized downtown company, and lives in a polished suburb with her husband Wesley. Their house is nice. Their life looks clean from outside. But I had watched Cora long enough to know that polished surfaces hide pressure underneath. She had always been the golden child in the way Mama talked to neighbors and church friends. But golden child and present child are not the same thing. I was the one who knew which pharmacy Mama used, which doctor she trusted, why she left the porch light on even in summer. Cora knew the stories Mama told at dinner tables. I knew the woman who told them. So when I saw that for sale sign, I did not call Cora screaming. I did not post anything. I did not text a row of question marks. I took 3 photographs of the sign from different angles. Then I drove home and started thinking like someone who already knew she was going to need proof. Because women like me, careful, trained to read the fine print, do not waste the first hour on emotion. We spend it on evidence. I called the listing number that same evening. The agent's name was Perry Vance. He answered with the smooth voice of a man expecting buyers. I did not identify myself as family. I just asked about Callaway Street and let him talk. He talked freely. He mentioned the seller was highly motivated. He said the listing had gone live 12 days ago and there were already 2 interested parties. 12 days. My mother had been gone 11 weeks, and Cora had listed the house 12 days ago without a single word to me. Not a text, not a phone call, not even a casual comment over the Sunday dinner we had shared at her house in November, where she smiled across the table and asked how I was holding up. I told Perry I would be in touch and ended the call. Then I sat very still in my kitchen while the refrigerator hummed in the silence. I thought about the will. Mama had a will. I had been present the day she signed it. And I remembered, clearly, the way you remember things that cost something. One specific conversation she had with her attorney before putting her name on the final page. I needed to find that document tonight. Mama's attorney was a careful woman named Audra Fleming, who worked out of a small office on the east side of Columbus. Audra had handled Mama's affairs for over a decade. She drew up the will 2 years before Mama died and then updated it 14 months later after a call I happened to be present for. Mama put Audra on speaker while she sat at the kitchen table with reading glasses on and chamomile going cold beside her. I remembered Mama saying clearly, "I want it written so the house cannot be sold without both of them agreeing, both girls, in writing." Audra walked her through the exact language, a co-executor clause requiring unanimous written consent from both named beneficiaries before any sale, transfer, or encumbrance of the Calloway Street property could proceed. Mama nodded and said, "That way neither one can push the other out." I had not thought much about it at the time. Now I sat at my kitchen table and thought about nothing else. Because if that clause was still in the will, and I had no reason to believe it had changed, then Cora had listed a property she had no legal right to sell alone. And Perry Vance was out there showing it to buyers who did not know that. I did not sleep well that night. Part of me wanted to believe there was an explanation. That maybe Cora had called and the call had not connected. That maybe grief had blurred my memory of the clause. Grief does strange things to memory. I knew that. But I also knew myself. I am a paralegal at a civil litigation firm. I have spent 9 years reading contracts, flagging inconsistencies, and understanding that buried details are usually the ones that matter most. My job is to read carefully when everyone else skims. I had sat in that kitchen and listened to Audra read that clause out loud. I had watched Mama nod and say, "That is exactly what I want." By 6 in the morning, I had already emailed Audra's office requesting an urgent appointment. By 8, I was at my desk at work, reviewing motions for a partner, while my own situation turned quietly in the back of my mind. I did not call Cora. Not yet. I needed to know exactly what I was holding before I showed my hand. The worst thing you can do in a dispute is reveal your position before you understand the full picture. I had learned that from 9 years of watching lawyers work. Now I was using it. Audra's office called me back before noon and scheduled me for the following morning. I spent my lunch break going through the accordion folder where I kept Mama's important papers. I had made copies of everything the week after the funeral. Insurance, the deed, the death certificate, and the full will Audra had mailed to both me and Cora as co-executors. I found the will at the back of the folder and read the clause standing in my kitchen with my coat still on. Section 7, paragraph C. Clear as morning, no sale, transfer, lease, or encumbrance of the Calloway Street property shall be authorized without the written and notarized consent of both co-executors, Nadia Owens and Cora Owens Briggs. Both. Written, notarized. I had never signed anything. I had never been asked to sign anything. Nobody had called me to a title office or handed me a notary form, or even mentioned a conversation about selling Mama's house. I placed the will flat on my counter and photographed every single page. Then, I made myself eat soup, go to bed, and let the information sit overnight. Decisions made after a full night's rest are cleaner than decisions made in the heat of discovery. Tomorrow, I would walk into Audra's office knowing exactly what I had. Audra looked at me over her reading glasses and did not blink for a long moment. She had pulled the estate file before I arrived. It sat open on the desk between us, her copy of the will already marked with a yellow tab at Section 7. She had clearly read it before I came in, which told me she had taken my emails seriously. She confirmed the will had not been amended after finalization. She confirmed Cora had been appointed co-executor alongside me. She confirmed the co-consent clause was valid and enforceable under Ohio probate law. Then she asked me one direct question. "Has anyone contacted you for consent regarding the sale of Calloway Street?" "No," I said. She wrote something down. Then she said, "A listing agreement executed without co-executor consent may constitute a breach of fiduciary duty. It could also expose the listing agent to liability if he was aware of the estate status and proceeded anyway." I thought about Perry Vance, his smooth voice, his 2 interested parties. I asked what I should do. She folded her hands. First, we send formal notice to the broker. Second, we notify the probate court. Third, we contact your sister directly. In that order. I nodded and told her to begin. I drove past Mama's house on my way home from Audra's office. The for sale sign was still there. The porch light was off, which Mama never would have allowed. The tomato cages were still stacked along the side fence where I had left them in October, meaning Cora had not been tending the yard or visiting much. She had simply listed the house and waited. I sat in my car across the street for a few minutes. The front door was still the same blue Mama had painted it in 2019. The porch swing was still there. The welcome mat I had given her 2 Christmases ago, the one with the small sun embroidered on it, was still visible from the street. Cora wanted to sell all of that, without asking me, without the notarized consent she was legally required to obtain. I thought about what kind of person does that. Not an impulsive person, but a calculating one. Someone who counts on the other person being too grief-stricken to look closely. Someone who expects loss to make the quieter sister slow. Cora had always underestimated me. She had no idea I had spent 9 years reading the fine print on other people's crises. And now I was reading hers. Audra's formal notice went to Perry Vance and his brokerage on a Thursday morning. It was 2 pages, professional, and extremely clear. It identified the estate, cited the co-executor clause, confirmed that no written or notarized consent had been obtained from Nadia Owens, and formally requested immediate suspension of all listing and showing activity pending a state court review. By Thursday afternoon, Perry's broker had called Audra directly. By Friday morning, the listing had been removed from the portal. I checked 3 times. Then Cora called. She did not call with an apology. She called with a performance. Her voice was high and tight in the way it gets when she has been caught and is pivoting fast. She said she had been trying to handle things so I would not be burdened. She said she knew how hard I had been taking Mama's death. She said Perry had told her there was a small administrative issue that could be sorted easily. Small administrative issue. I let her talk until she stopped. Then I said, I know about Section 7, Cora. The line went so quiet I could hear her breathing change. Silence is the most honest thing a caught person can offer. She came back with blame, which was always her second move after charm failed. She said I had never been as available during Mama's decline as I claimed. She said selling the house was the practical decision. She said I was being emotional and holding on to a building instead of processing my grief. I let her finish. Then I said, none of that changes the clause. She said I was being rigid. I said the clause requires both of us. I did not consent. You listed the house anyway. That is not rigidity, Cora. It is a fact. She shifted again, voice going softer. She said this was hard for everyone. She said we were family, and family should work things out without lawyers making it ugly. Family. I thought about the 11 weeks since Mama died, the 12 days the listing had been active, the 2 interested parties Perry had mentioned, the price-reduced sticker already on the sign. Cora had not been grieving slowly. She had been moving fast. The only reason to move fast on a co-owned estate property without telling your co-executor is because you know she would say no. I did not argue further. I told her to speak with Audra's office and ended the call. I called my colleague Phoebe the next morning. Phoebe is a senior paralegal with 20 years in probate and estate disputes. I did not ask her to work my case. That would have created a conflict. But I described the outline and asked her to help me understand what I was actually facing. She listened, asked 3 clean questions, and said, the co-consent clause your mother added is strong. If your sister proceeded with listing after assuming executor authority, she did not have a loan, she did not make an administrative error. She took an action she had no right to take. Probate courts take that seriously. I asked what seriously meant in practical terms: removal as co-executor, personal liability for costs the estate incurred, and depending on how far the sale progressed, the buyers may have a claim against her individually for misrepresentation. I wrote that down. I had not thought about the buyers, 2 interested parties, real people who may have been shown a house by an agent operating without proper authority, people making financial decisions based on information that was legally wrong. Cora had not only acted against me, she had put strangers at risk. That was the moment my concern stopped being personal and became something colder, more principled, and much harder to negotiate away. Wesley called me that weekend. Wesley is Cora's husband, a decent man in the way some men are, not actively harmful, but not paying close enough attention. He called in that gentle, uncomfortable way people call when they have been sent to smooth something over and do not fully understand what they are smoothing. He said Cora was really struggling. He said she had not slept well. He said selling the house had felt like closure for her, and that she had not meant to cause harm. I asked one simple question. Did Cora mention to you that the will required my written consent before anything could be listed? Silence. Then she said it was a formality. I told him quietly that it was not a formality. A notarized co-executor consent requirement is a legal condition. Mama had written it specifically, so neither daughter could make unilateral decisions about the house. Wesley went quiet again. Then he said, she really didn't think it would be a problem. I know, I said, and that was the most honest thing either of us said in the whole call. Cora had not thought it would be a problem because she had never expected me to find out fast enough for it to matter. The probate court notification moved everything into a different register. Audra filed the formal report on Monday. It documented the listing, the missing co-executor consent, the price reduction, the 2 interested parties, and the removal of the listing following her cease notice. It requested a review hearing and clarification of executor authority going forward. I found out later the court clerk had flagged the file as priority review because an active buyer had already submitted an offer. An accepted offer. Cora had signed something that looked like acceptance, without my consent, without a notary, without anything Section 7 required. The buyers had paid for a home inspection. They had started mortgage paperwork. They had told their families. All of this for a house that was never legally available for sale. When Audra told me, I pressed 2 fingers to my temple and breathed slowly. I felt something unexpected in that moment. Real sympathy for that couple. They had done everything right. They had followed the process, trusted the listing, paid their inspection fee in good faith. They were collateral damage in a plan Cora had built around an assumption that I would not notice in time. I had noticed. But they had already been hurt. I had kept Cora's text messages mostly unanswered during those 2 weeks. Not ignored. I replied briefly and factually to anything practical. But I gave her no emotional current to ride. Cora performed best when she had something to push against, and I was not giving her that. When she sent the long message on a Tuesday night, full of childhood memories, references to Mama, and suggestions that I was letting a lawyer poison our relationship, I read it carefully and replied with 4 words. Let's talk through Audra. She sent 3 more messages after that. I did not reply. Because that same Tuesday evening, I was going through something else. Mama's financial records from the last 2 years, which I had copies of as co-executor. I found 3 withdrawals from Mama's savings account in the final 4 months of her life. Each between $3,000 and $5,000. Each made on a day Cora had visited. Each followed by a transfer to an account I did not recognize. My throat tightened. I printed everything, dated it, and added it to the folder. Then I sat very still at my kitchen table. Because what I was now holding was bigger than a for sale sign. I brought the financial records to Audra at our next meeting. She reviewed them without expression, which is the professional version of a very controlled reaction. She asked whether Mama had been of sound mind during those months. I said yes, up until the final 6 weeks. She asked whether I believed Mama had authorized the transfers willingly. I said I did not know. She said she would request full account records from the bank through the estate authority. She said if the transfers were unauthorized, they constituted a separate legal issue, one that carried its own weight. I sat across from her desk and let the information settle. I had been trying through all of this not to feel something too large about Cora. I had been keeping my focus on facts and documents and legal steps because that was where I could be useful. Emotions would come later when the structure was secure. But looking at those printed bank rows, one thing became clear. Cora had not just tried to sell Mama's house. She had been taking from Mama while Mama was still alive. And Mama had trusted her. Had put her name on a will. had believed the clause would protect both her daughters from each other. That was a grief, with nothing legal about it. The review hearing was scheduled for a Wednesday morning, 6 weeks after Audra filed. I took the morning off work and wore the navy blazer I wear for depositions. I am a paralegal. I know the difference between a judge going through motions and one who has already formed a view from the paperwork. This judge had formed a view. I could tell by how she looked at the file before either attorney spoke. Cora arrived with her own attorney, a man named Fitzgerald, who spoke in careful circles. She was dressed well and looked composed from across the room, but I noticed her hands. She kept pressing them flat on the table in front of her, one then the other, like she needed to feel something solid. The court reviewed Audra's filing, the listing documents, the buyer's offer, and the co-executor clause. Then the judge asked Cora's attorney directly, "Did your client have written, notarized consent from the co-executor prior to listing the property?" Fitzgerald paused one beat too long. "Not in formal written form, no, Your Honor." The judge wrote something down. I did not look at Cora. I did not need to. I could feel the room shifting without turning my head. I did not look at Cora during the hearing. Not from fear. I simply did not need to. Some rooms do their own work when the truth becomes the heaviest thing inside them. The judge ordered an immediate freeze on any sale or transfer activity related to the estate property. She also ordered a full accounting of all estate financial transactions from the 18 months prior to Mama's death. That last part was Audra's addition. She had included the withdrawal information, quietly, in a supplemental filing. The kind of move careful attorneys make when they want something noticed but not announced. Cora's attorney requested a continuance for additional preparation. The judge granted 2 weeks and nothing more. Outside the courtroom, Cora caught up to me in the hallway. She looked smaller up close than she had across the room. She said, "I just needed the money, Nadia." It was the most honest thing she had said since October. I looked at her for a moment. "I know," I said. "I did not say, then you should have asked me." I did not say, Mama knew too, which is why she wrote the clause. I walked to the elevator and pressed the button. Some things do not need to be said out loud to still be heard. The bank records came back the following week. 3 withdrawals. 2 were traceable. Cora had written herself checks using a limited power of attorney she had been granted for Mama's medical appointments. A power of attorney that covered health decisions and prescription pickups, not financial transfers, not $5,000 cash withdrawals into a personal account. Audra forwarded the bank's response with a one-line note. "This is no longer only a probate matter." I sat with that sentence. I was not a vindictive person. I had not set out to destroy my sister. I had set out to protect what Mama left and honor what Mama wanted. But evidence does not care about intentions. It accumulates and speaks, regardless of what the person holding it feels. Cora had borrowed against Mama's money using authority she did not have. She had listed Mama's house using executor power she could not exercise alone. She had created a buyer situation that put strangers at financial risk. All of it done quickly and quietly, counting on 11 weeks of grief to keep me looking the other way. Grief had not kept me looking away. It had made me pay closer attention, and the closer I looked, the clearer the picture became. Cora's attorney contacted Audra 2 days before the second hearing. He proposed a settlement. Cora would withdraw from all sale activity, agree to co-executor oversight on remaining estate decisions, and repay the 3 bank withdrawals within 60 days. In return, the family would not pursue further legal action on the financial transfers. Audra sent me the proposal and asked what I wanted to do. I read it twice. It resolved the money. It stopped the house sale. It preserved the co-executor structure Mama had wanted. But it also let Cora keep a version of events where she had made rushed decisions under grief and corrected them when pressed. A version that left her reputation with herself mostly intact. I thought about the young couple who had paid for a home inspection on a house never legally theirs to buy. I told Audra I needed one addition. Cora had to write a formal apology letter to the buyers, acknowledging the property had been listed without proper authority and confirming the estate would reimburse any costs they had incurred. Audra put it to Fitzgerald. He came back within 4 hours, agreed. That single addition mattered more than any repayment figure. It meant Cora had to look at the real people her plan had hurt and sign her name to that acknowledgement. The second hearing was quieter than the first. The judge reviewed the settlement terms, confirmed the repayment timeline, formalized the co-executor oversight requirement, and signed the order freezing any independent sale activity for the remainder of the estate process. No lectures, no speeches, she just signed what needed to be signed and moved to the next file. Courts are not emotional places. That used to bother me before I became a paralegal. Now I found it almost comforting. Cora signed the agreement in the hallway outside the courtroom without looking at me. Her attorney shook Audra's hand. The buyer couple would receive their inspection costs reimbursed and a formal letter within 30 days. On the drive back to my office, I stopped at a red light and watched a woman walk her dog in thin winter sunlight. I did not feel triumphant. I felt tired in the particular way you feel after something that should never have been necessary finally ends. The kind of tired that comes from doing the right thing in a situation where the right thing is hard and lonely, and nobody gives you credit for it until later, if ever. But the right thing was done. And Mama's house was still standing on Callaway Street, door still blue. Wesley called again 2 weeks later. This time he called because Cora had agreed he should, which told me she was trying to recalibrate toward me in careful, husband-mediated steps. He said Cora was embarrassed. He said she had not fully understood the legal implications. He said the debt had been building quietly for a while and she had panicked. I asked what kind of debt. A pause. Then, credit cards, a home equity line, a personal loan they had not told anyone about. I said I was sorry to hear that. I meant it. Because Cora's problem was not that she was a bad person by nature. Her problem was that she had spent years building a version of herself that was prosperous and in control, and when the cracks spread, she reached for the nearest large thing she could quietly convert to cash. That thing had been Mama's house. She had not thought of it as theft. She had thought of it as early access to something that was partly hers anyway. That gap between taking and accessing is where a lot of family betrayal lives. I understood that without excusing it. Grief had made her reckless, pride had made her secretive, and the clause Mama had written had made both of those things irreversible. Spring came, and I started going back to Mama's house on Sundays. Not every Sunday, but most. I let myself in with the key I had kept, walked through the rooms, opened windows when it was warm enough, checked that the pipes were fine. I swept the porch. I pulled weeds from the side garden where the tomato cages still stood. One Sunday, I found a jar of Mama's preserved peaches at the back of the pantry, sat down on the kitchen floor and cried for a long time. Then I washed the jar and placed it on the windowsill. The estate was still formally in process. Audra was walking both me and Cora through each decision in writing, keeping everything documented, keeping the co-consent requirement respect at every step. Slowly, correctly. Cora and I were not warm with each other. We were not cold either. We were careful, the way people are when they have seen what the other person is capable of, and decided to keep going anyway. Not because everything is forgiven, but because some things are larger than what broke between you. A shared mother, a yellow kitchen, 41 years of a life built quietly on one street. That was not the ending I would have chosen. But it was an honest one. 4 months after the hearing, Audra filed the formal distribution plan. The house would not be sold immediately. After reviewing the full financial picture and the costs Cora had agreed to repay, Audra recommended the property be held in a structured estate trust for 2 years. During that period, both co-executors would maintain access and share decisions equally. After the trust period, either sister could propose a sale, but only with the other's written consent. It was exactly what Mama's clause had always intended. It just took a for sale sign, a probate judge, and 2 attorneys to get there. I read the distribution plan at my kitchen table on a Sunday night with tea I kept forgetting to drink. I initialed each page. I signed where Audra had marked. I scanned everything and emailed it back before 10. Then I sat in the quiet for a while. I thought about what I might do with my half when the time came. Maybe sell. Maybe renovate the kitchen and rent it to a family that needed a stable home in a good school zone. The way Mama's house had always been. Solid. Dependable. Hers. Those were the words Mama used for things she trusted. I was learning they were also words for people who refused to look away. Here is what Cora lost, and here is what I kept. Cora lost the fast exit she had counted on. She lost the sale proceeds she had mentally spent before they existed. She lost the version of events where the quieter sister was too grief-worn to notice until the deed was signed. She did not lose me entirely. That is the complicated part. The part that does not make easy sense, unless you have a mother who left a yellow kitchen and a porch swing. And you understand that the sister across the courthouse hallway is the only person alive who sat at that same table and knows what that house smelled like on Sunday mornings. I kept the titles, I kept the clause, I kept the legal structure Mama had placed there because she knew her daughters and knew that love without documentation can quietly become permission without consent. I kept my name exactly where she put it. And on Sunday mornings, sweeping Mama's porch while the neighborhood woke up slow, I understood that this ordinary, unglamorous, legally protected piece of a woman's life was worth every quiet step I had taken to defend it. Some people inherit money. I inherited proof that careful love outlasts clever betrayal, and that was more than enough.